Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is JB Fowler with Domotz. We're going to wait here another 30 to 45 seconds for people to join on, and then we'll get started with our live demo. All right, looks like attendees are starting to fill up here. Want to thank you for joining me. Again, my name is JB Fowler. I'm accompanied here with Giancarlo Finelli, our CTO, as well as Jordan, our superstar marketing guy. Jordan's going to be helping us with some polls and stuff that we want to do. A few housekeeping items before we get started. First thing I want to say is whether you're listening on your computer or listening through your phone, be aware that sometimes there's audio problems, although I think that GoToWebinar has kind of solved these issues of the past. But regardless, if you switch back and forth between these, sometimes it will fix any audio issues. And then lastly, we encourage you guys to be answering questions, or answering and asking, quite frankly, but more importantly, asking us questions. If you do have a question, please use the control panel feature for questions, and we are going to try to answer those in real time with our team. But we are also, if some of them are relevant to what we're talking about now, I invite Giancarlo to interrupt us, and we can answer it there. The other thing that I want to say is if you guys do have questions either about billing or the product itself, by all means reach out to sales@domotz.com. And with that being said, let's talk about what we're going to chat about today. And Jordan, I appreciate you putting up this poll. I definitely want to understand what industry you guys primarily associate with. The reason being is because it helps me better understand how I can cater the topics to you. So by all means, fill this out as we're going through some of these agenda items. We are going to talk about Domotz's general functionality today. As I mentioned, our team is ready to answer questions. But another important fact is please give us feedback. Reach out to support@domotz.com, make comments in the chat window, or in the questions window, so we can continuously improve. It looks like from what I'm seeing, we have mostly IT managed service providers on the call with us, several residential audio video integrators. I think both parties, even some commercial AV integrators, so both parties are going to see some good things that we have within Domotz today. So I appreciate you guys filling that out. Let's end this presentation and let's get going to our live webinar. So a couple of things about Domotz. First and foremost, just speaking to our core value proposition, what is it that we do for you guys as integrators or as managed service providers, or even if you're running an enterprise IT business, what is it that we do? Our goal is to improve the operational efficiency. Regardless of who your customer is or what you're trying to do with them, we want to make sure that you are running your business in the most efficient way possible. If you are a managed service provider or an integrator and you're dealing with customers that are remote from you, it's really about eliminating truck rolls. How can we make sure that you are knowing what's going on in the system and trying to provide you a way to resolve any problems that are there remotely. And we do it in a secure fashion. We'll talk more about that today. But more importantly, regardless of what your industry is, in my mind, it's about proactive monitoring. How can we get you guys away from that break fix model where your customer, your client, whoever it is, calls you up and says, hey, this is broken? How can we let you know that it's broken before you get that phone call? So that way you can plan more efficiently and ultimately improve the customer service that you're providing to your clients and customers. That's what Domotz is fundamentally about. So that being said, Jordan, it's probably worthwhile to throw up that second poll that we have here. Just again, helping me understand, Have you used Domotz? Have you not? Do you consider yourself a power user? I want to understand this a little bit more so we can either speed through some of the more basic sections or spend some time on fundamentally how it works and what it does. So we got some good results. Okay, we've got some power users. I take it a lot of the power users are looking at some of the new features. We're going to talk about some of those today. We've also got quite a few that have really never even seen Domotz. So a good mixed bag for us here, and I can appreciate that. Well, let me, while that's finalizing, let me go over what Domotz is. What you see on your screen here is fundamentally our NOC, our Network Operations Center. There's three parts to the Domotz solution that you should be aware of. First and foremost, there's the cloud itself. And for those that care, just so you guys know, we are hosted on Amazon Web Services. There's two primary, we call them cells, that Domotz has with AWS. One is for North America, which covers Canada, United States, and Mexico. And then we have a rest of the world, which is hosted in Europe, which complies with GDPR and other EU regulations that are out there, which really covers the rest of the world. So the cloud is an important part, and that's where a lot of the intelligence sits within Domotz. But then there's also this thing that's called a network agent. Each little dot that you see on the screen here is fundamentally a network agent. There's a single network agent that resides on each network. That network agent can be based on Windows, it can be based on Linux, it can be a little black box that you purchase through distribution or one of our partners, or even get it on Amazon. But fundamentally, that software that is running on that network, that agent, oh, you're showing me the results? Is that what you're doing here, Jordan? Yeah, looks like people have used this a little bit. Some have never seen it, but there are some power users. So thank you, Jordan.
Sure.
With respect to this agent, the thing you need to be aware of is that there's a single agent that needs to reside on the network that you're monitoring. We'll talk about VLANs and subnets here in a little bit, but a single network agent needs to be on site in order to do a lot of the scanning and be communicating back to the cloud. The third part of the Domotz solution, aside from the cloud and that agent, is really what you're seeing here, or the application. That application can be a web-based application, which you can run through your browser. Right now, we're looking at the desktop application. I'm running on a Mac, but we also have a Windows-based desktop application. Or you can also do a mobile app. So we do have, for your iOS or Android devices, whether it's an iPad or your phones, you have the ability to take Domotz with you wherever you go. This is an extremely powerful tool, especially for integrators or service providers that are constantly on site with other customers, but want to manage all of their other customer base that they have. So fundamentally, those are the three parts of Domotz and how it works. The one thing that I do want to mention to you guys, for especially for service providers who deal a lot with Windows or Linux servers, we actually have a new Windows executable. Now it's in beta, but if you go to our community, which is community.domotz.com, you'll be able to download and test that Windows executable. A little bit nicer than the virtualized container that we had before, a lot easier to install. But I encourage you guys to test and play with that. You'll find that it makes it really easy to deploy a Domotz agent. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the very end, I think, on the timing of when that actually goes to production.
That's a very nice coincidence. There was somebody on the channel asking for exactly that thing, the Windows agent.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Just perfect timing. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Giancarlo. Thank you. That's good to know. Okay, let's talk about what happens when an agent. Well, let's talk about this screen. Right, this is a very multi-tenant screen. We get a lot of questions about is Domotz a multi-tenant platform? Absolutely. On this screen, you can see tens, hundreds, thousands of agents that you have within your account. The nice thing about this is this very red, yellow, green type status. So when a system is green, everything is running as expected. As we like to say, it's kosher, it's all good. When it's red, as you can see from this dot down here, it really means that the system is in a troubled state and it's no longer communicating with the Domotz cloud for whatever reason. This could be because of a power outage. It could be because the ISP is down. But like I said, fundamentally, the agent is no longer communicating with the Domotz service. And so you need to, power cycle the unit, do something. When it's yellow, that's when we find things get really interesting. Yellow is an indication that an important device in the network is offline, or there may be some sort of security or vulnerability that we've discovered, and we want to bring awareness to you on that. So this becomes a very powerful tool for all your tech support team, and really, you can use it almost as a marketing tool for even your customers if you want to, right? If they see how it is that you do your job, it gives them confidence of that you'll be able to help them. Let's go into our lab here. So when we get out of this multi-tenant view and we look directly into the agent, we get a dashboard of all of the major network things, network systems that we care about, the services that we care about. Let's talk a little bit about how when a Domotz agent gets activated, how it works. The very first thing that we do when a Domotz agent gets activated to the cloud or to your account, we start to scan the network. By scanning the network, we essentially leverage a technology, a service that we acquired several years ago called Fing. For those of you that are really more into networking and IT, you may know that Fing is a mobile network scanner. Sits on your iOS or Android device, primarily Android anymore, thanks to Apple's changes. But what it does is it effectively discovers all of the devices on your network. It really looks, and here's a great example. Here's a MAC address that has been discovered. But then what Fing does is it goes and does its best guess as to what that device is by make, model, and type. These are a lot of mobile devices that I have on my network here, but if we look at this particular camera, we can see that we enrich all the information that we can. So we take this MAC address, we associate it with a make, a model, we even try to classify it by a particular type, but then we look up the network stack. We look at layer 3 and we start looking for the IP addresses. We start looking for application information, such as bonjour name, zero-comp, MDNS, right? Whatever it is that the device is broadcasting, we do our best to put that into the UI. The primary reason for doing this is so that you don't have to. Right? What we want to do is make it so that when you see this inventory of all these MAC addresses that are on the network, we help discover what these are for you and classify them. So it helps you better manage your clients' networks and services. A couple of things that we do after we discover a particular device. We look for which ports on that particular device are enabled for management. Examples of ports, I mean, here you see port 80 for web, port 8000 for web, but we also discover port 443, Telnet, SSH on ports 21, 22, 23, these numbers. Even with PCs, servers, or laptops, if RDP or remote desktop protocol is enabled, we'll discover those services. So Domotz does a really good job of not only starting to recognize all the devices that are there and classify them, but we then we take it a step further and we look for which ports are available for actual management of those particular devices. You can see while I'm on this page that there's a few things as well where you can create custom connections. So if you know that a device has a very specific port that's used for either command line or for web-based interfaces, you can actually add that here in a custom connection. The other thing that you can do is if you have a device or a system, a great example would be something like Crestron or Savant, some of these more automated systems, lighting control systems like Lutron, right? They have tools that they've developed, but they require secure connections. You can actually create a TCP tunnel to a direct port so that these third-party tools can be utilized to program these systems. So this is another powerful tool for connecting and managing these devices. But let me take a step back and say, after we have found all the devices and we've looked at the possible connections that are there, we do go one step further. So let me bring up in this particular network, I believe that we have some switches here. We will start to look and see what network infrastructure devices we have on the network. The reason we do this is because this is an important part of the classification and the mapping that Domotz does. We will find and discover which devices are on which ports of each individual switch, and we will tell you that. In fact, we go into the switch using SNMP V2C, and we will look at about 13 different sensors or SNMP variables within each port. So we're looking at things like, is this PoE powered? How much power is being consumed? What is the bandwidth of this particular device over time? Are there errors being thrown out or discarded packets happening on this particular port? We classify all this information and then show that inside our user interface, again, making it possible for you to debug and diagnose what's going on in the system. Once we have done that classification, we can build out a network topology of what the system actually looks like. In fact, if I expand this particular system all the way, you can see there's several devices that are on this network. One thing that I see here that I should talk about has to do with wireless access points. So while we look at the network switches, another critical part of network infrastructure is wireless access points that are used in every office. We look at Ruckus, Cisco Meraki, Ubiquiti, Access Networks, and we're continuing to grow this list. What we do with this is when we discover a wireless access point that's out there, we can interrogate that system a little bit further. And this is just one example where we can look at which devices are connected to which SSIDs, what frequency bands they're on, what channels they're on within those bands. And then we can provide information about these particular devices to show things like signal strength. Here you can see I have a fairly low RSSI value. It's a Ring doorbell. It's out on the edge of a network. While this is what we consider to be a sleepy Wi-Fi device, it may be okay that it's not always on the packet. But I would say this, in this example, if you had a customer where they're having trouble getting the video from that Ring doorbell, this would be a great tool to say, okay, I need to add another access point, or I need to put a repeater somewhere in the network to get better communications with that particular device. Another thing that we do within these systems when it comes to network infrastructure, and I'll show this now while I'm here, is we can look at round trip delay. We effectively ping every single device on the network, and we start to look at its historical range. How is it performing? With a Ring doorbell, with a sleepy device like this, you may not really care about this, but where this becomes an extremely powerful tool, especially for managed service providers or commercial integrators, if you're dealing with unified communications or you're dealing with voice over IP system, IP telephony, this becomes a very important diagnostic tool. If you see that a system has a fixed latency, whether it's high or low, generally a unified communication systems can manage that just fine. Where you run into trouble is when you see large variations in the network. That's usually an indication that something is going wrong at the network switch, or something has been added that is consuming bandwidth that is causing a system to be effectively delayed. That variation can cause packet drops. It can cause, let's say, ill behavior on video and audio systems. One of the things that I want to talk about now is actually a feature within this application. So this is a Domotz desktop application, and I wanted to make sure you guys were aware of this for some of the newbies, but even some of our pro users, maybe they haven't experienced this feature. So when we are on the devices list page and you're using the Domotz desktop app, you will see at the top in the menu, there's the ability to export this device list. I haven't done this in a while. Let's see how this file gets generated here. So we'll save this to my desktop. And then the key, of course, is to go and find the file. What happens here is, and let me share this on the screen that I am using. So what happens here is Domotz essentially grabs an inventory list of all the devices that are on the network, and then gives you the ability to sort this. So let's go, the easiest thing to do, I think, is to look by type. let's go select, let's see what appliances I have here. So I've got LG washing machine and dryers in the laundry room. Well, imagine if you had a lot of cameras. Imagine you had a lot of unified communication systems or even PCs that you wanted to quickly put into certain rooms, or you wanted to be able to flag as either important or not. This provides a way in which you can do mass edits to these systems. For instance, if I cared that these washing machine and dryers were actually important, I could mark these as true. I could then save the file. And then what I could do is go, when I click on this, I could actually go in and import that device list back, and then it'll make changes in real time to that, to the agent itself and all the information. That's a great way for people to do mass updates or place devices in rooms very quickly. So I wanted to make sure you guys were aware of that capability that's available only on the desktop application. Let's talk about one more thing that I'm super excited about. This is a little bit of a change when we talk about new features. So for some of our pro users, also for some of our managed service providers that are watching us, I think you guys will be excited about this. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to show this in real time, but I want to still bring it up. So under Cisco, under our main switch, unfortunately, what you see here is just the interfaces tab. But what you are going to see in a matter of a few days.
Few days.
Just a few days, Giancarlo, right? That's what you're telling me.
Yeah.
You're going to see the ability to have this config section. So I did a screenshot from one of our test accounts, but this is coming. What this allows you to do, and this is first and foremost, it's on Cisco Catalyst today. So if you're dealing with Cisco Catalyst, it works today. I'm on an SG series switch, but this will also be coming to future switches, both enterprise grade switches as well as residential grade switches that allow for this capability. What it is, Domotz can take a snapshot of the configuration of that particular switch or the network infrastructure there at that time. We then will save that. We'll save it essentially as a backup file. If anything changes in that configuration, we're going to alert you to it. The other thing that will happen, and I see this more often than not with, in fact, let me bring up this second screenshot that shows this change here. So anytime we see something change, you can compare the two files so you understand what's changed, but more importantly, we can alert you to those changes, even if it wasn't you that did that. What I really like about this as well, and I know you have all dealt with this, if you've gone in and programmed a switch, you know that you've been messing around with the running configuration, but you may have forgot to save it to the startup configuration. We will alert you to when there's a difference between the running and the startup configuration, because inevitably, and we've all done it, right? You've made those changes, you've left the job site, they have a power outage, and things go to hell when things come back, right? By alerting you to these changes, it allows you to manage that better. The idea behind this is that, one, if something happens inside the switch that goes wrong, you actually have a way of restoring the stuff remotely. We've implemented some proprietary ways in which we work with the switches themselves to make sure that if we push, or if you push a new configuration, that if the system doesn't come back, it reverts before before things are saved. So I'm excited about this feature. I'm really excited that in 2 weeks, I'm going to be able to actually demo this live through our Office switch. So I wanted to make sure you guys knew about that. Hopefully, you guys see and understand the benefits of this as well. So that's probably enough discussions on network mapping. Oh, one thing I should mention is we always get this question, and Giancarlo, I'm not looking at the questions, but I suspect they're there now. People often ask about VLANs and subnets and how Domotz can manage that. I'm here to tell you that absolutely Domotz can manage VLANs, right? We can look at multiple VLANs. We provide instructions in the devices page on how to set up your agent to do that. I will tell you that if you're using the Domotz black box, it's very easy to go in and set up the agent itself to look at these multiple LANs or subnets for that matter. The one thing I want to point out to you guys who are dealing with VLANs and subnets, you do, of course, need to make sure that the network switch and the port that the Domotz agent is on is configured as a trunk port and has the appropriate VLAN tags going to it. Just as a tidbit, we get a lot of questions on that with support, but be aware of that. If you want to look at separate subnets, now the thing to note about subnet scanning, subnets are a layer 3 technology, whereas VLANs become a layer 2 technology. When we look at VLANs, we absolutely can, or when the Domotz agent is on a VLAN, we can scan that, we can get all the MAC addresses, and we can enrich all that data. When you're doing subnet scanning, you're only looking at IP addresses. So you may find new devices, but you may not know exactly what those devices are, and it's up to you to classify them. Subnet scanning, though, is extremely useful, especially when you're dealing with point of sale systems in a retail environment, or you're trying to look across at, say, security cameras that are across a broad range of networks or sites. So keep those things in mind. So now that is what I wanted to say on network mapping and access points and some of the diagnostics. Let's go talk about connectivity. And then we're going to talk about alerting and getting to some of the value that we within Domotz have. Okay, so let's go back to the IoT lab here. So connectivity can happen a couple ways. We've already talked about how we classify the devices. We discover which ports are available. In fact, let's go back. I always like to look at these managed switches. So we discover these different types of ports that are available for management. What I can do is do an immediate connection to that device's web port. So let me tell you a little bit about what's going on. When we hit that connect button, the Domotz agent is creating a secure connection between my laptop here at the office and our cloud. And then what's going on is the cloud is giving me back this secure URL, which is the URL that essentially creates a direct connection from the cloud back down into that particular network. If I type in my super secret username and password here, what you see is that the Domotz agent on that network on the far end has now created or allowed me on my laptop to see this connection. This URL that's here is only good for my laptop. Even if I were to pass this to a colleague in the office on their laptop, they would not be able to open that. This is one of the secure technologies that Domotz has created. And another thing, people always ask this, how do we create that connection? We're not actually opening up any sort of ports on the outside. We're not needing any ports to be opened on the outside. We are using essentially reverse SSH technologies to create this connection, and we do this over secure HTTP. But now you can see I'm in the device. If I want to go in and look at the MAC table, or I want to go adjust VLANs, whatever it is I need to do, I can do that in real time here. So that's one way we can create connections. Another way that we can create a connection is really through what we call VPN on demand. For your power users, for your service providers, I'm sure you leverage VPNs all the time. The benefit of using Domotz as VPN on demand is you're taking advantage of not only our secure tunneling and our secure features, but you're also making sure that it's your team members that have access to this. You're not creating common username and passwords through the VPN server on a router that people can take with them if they leave, right? You have complete control. As a manager of the Domotz platform, you have complete control of who can access this or not. The idea behind this is you're still using a VPN client on your laptop. What we do when we open the tunnel, and I'm not going to do it here since we're on an active webinar right now, but if we open up this tunnel, it essentially gives you a configuration file that you can load into your VPN client of choice and then create that secure connection. So wanted to make sure you guys were aware of that and knew how to do this. I definitely encourage you to try this. One of the nice things as well about these connections, and we're going to get into it a little bit more, but when we talk about logging and understanding who's getting on into these systems, this is a very useful tool. So let's talk a little bit now about alerting. So you know how we discover devices, you know how you now can connect to these and manage them. Alerts is one of the core values of what Domotz does. Alerting is what gives you that proactive monitoring for your clients, getting us away from that whole break-fix model. There's many different ways that we can do alerts. Let's talk about the types of alerts first, and then we'll talk about how you set things up. And you'll find that it's very straightforward. So first and foremost, there's really two major buckets that we set alerts into. One is network alerts. So what is going on with the Domotz agent itself, and what is the Domotz agent seeing as happening on that network? So if the Domotz agent loses connection with the cloud, that, because to us that's a connection that's lost, or if it comes back it's recovered. You know, that could be because of a power outage, it could be because the ISP is down, whatever. You can get a push notification or an email alert when that happens. The other thing that we do is if we discover a new device on a particular LAN or on a subnet, we can alert you to that. For security issues, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, but we do some rudimentary or basic security checking, looking for ports that are open that maybe shouldn't be. We can alert you to that, as well as if the ISP network performance goes below a particular threshold, you can get alerts on that. A lot of managed service providers may not care about that, but I know we have a lot of residential integrators on the call, and network performance for them is absolutely important because their users are often paying for a particular service, and they want to ensure that they're getting the speed that they care about. So you can alert on degradation in those performance, whether the upload speed goes below a certain amount or the download threshold goes below a certain amount. You can also alert on devices. So on any particular device, so the network alerts are a major portion, but the other thing is each individual device can have its own set of alerts associated to it, and you can customize these alerts. So let's talk about the types of alerting that we can do. Let's just go randomly pick, this touchscreen looks good, the game room touchscreen. So within each device, you can look at a couple basic things that you would expect, right? Whether the device is online or offline, even if its IP address changes. So a lot of times, I'm sure you guys will use static reservations, or you will, I should say DHCP reservations for particular devices. If for some reason those IP address changes, it could be because something's being spoofed. It could be because a system got rebooted or refreshed in some way, but you can get alerts to that. We can go deeper into alerting though with individual devices, and this is where we have a service that's called Domotz Eyes. Domotz Eyes gives you the ability to look at SNMP variables inside a system, so SNMP being Simple Network Management Protocol. It's the same service that we use for looking at all of the details of the managed switches. But you can, if a device has particular services, great example actually is a Cisco switch. They have temperature sensors inside those switches. You absolutely can go in here, create a sensor, as we call it, or an SNMPI, which allows me, oh, that doesn't work on this particular device, but I can go in and to a Cisco switch, for instance, and create a temperature variable and see if it goes above a certain threshold or below a certain threshold. I can then generate an alert on that. For TCP services, I can look at if a particular service such as RDP or a web page is actually running on a particular device. I can set up, how about if I go to the alerts page? I can set it up so that if that service goes down for whatever reason, I can generate an alert. So that's how we can do custom alerts on particular devices. Another thing, of course, is that latency. So if you are looking at voice over IP systems, looking at telephony devices or unified communications, if you want to ensure that a particular latency threshold is always being achieved, or if there's at least a minimum amount of packet loss, you can set that up here. In fact, I have a particular device. Let's just go look at this because it's kind of irritating me, and I can tell that it's a cable connection on this system. So if I look at the round trip delay that's happening on this, yeah, I'm getting a lot of packet losses. This is a wired connection. There's no reason that I should see these types of ill behavior on this system, and it's causing me issues with my automation system. So something to consider and think about. Anyway, I digress. So let's talk about the other types of alerts that you can do. So I've shown you, or you've seen now, this notion of mobile alerts. This is really a push notification into the Domotz app. Email alerts send you what you expect, an email to the account that you're logged into. But we also have this concept of shared alerts. And this, to me, is where Domotz becomes really, really powerful. Shared alerts is a way in which you can take an agent or take an event that occurs in the system and then push that particular notification or that alert to various types of what we call channels. The first type of channel would be something like a PSA tool, so professional services administration tool. Think of it as a ticketing system. So systems like Autotask, ConnectWise Manage, Zendesk, great examples of PSA tools where people help optimize their workflow and their tech support by just, when an alert occurs, automatically creating a ticket. So that's these three are some of the first and foremost that we've integrated with. I think it's important for me to mention now that if you guys are leveraging a particular tool, by all means, we want you to let us know, right? What is the tool that you're using? What do we need to be doing integration with to help drive efficiency within your business? So send a note to support@domotz.com, put it in the Q&A or the chat section so we can respond to that. Another type of channel that we have is what we call webhooks. Webhooks allows for us to push notifications from our cloud service into another cloud-based service. Great examples would be Slack. Microsoft Teams is another great example. We know that a lot of service providers, we know that a lot of integrators use Teams and use Slack to do their internal communications, but you also can create boards or channels within those services that can be associated with Domotz alerts. In fact, you can go as far, let's just look at this particular shared alert. You can go as far as color coding these things. You can take and put multiple channels into a given alert. The way you configure it with these is you will essentially go and create the alert, call it what you want, add the channels, and then you need to say, what are the types of events where I want these alerts to be triggered? Once I have set those checkboxes as appropriate, so here's a great example is if a device goes up or down, we can then, once this, oh, I should mention one more thing, by the way, another channel is emails. So while you can do a general email or an email alert to your own account, you also can do an email alert to an alias or let's call it a support group. So if you have support at MailChimp.com here, you absolutely can send a note to that group. So keep that in mind. But let's talk about applying a shared alert. So when we go back to our agents, any one of the agents that I'm monitoring, I can apply one of these shared alerts to. So let's, not that I would do this, but let's just take this iPhone here. I can go into alerts. I can now associate this particular shared alert to this particular device. Now, based on how we configured it, you can see anytime that this iPhone comes online or goes offline, I'm going to get an alert to our shared account. I would not recommend you do that with an iPhone, by the way, because you will get a lot of alerts. But you can see how easy it is to generate notifications to these channels through these shared alerts. So I'm going to remove this because the last thing I want to do is get inundated with alerts on this particular device. Let's talk a little bit about network security. So you can see from the alerts discussion, right? We've discovered devices, we've figured out how we can manage them. We've now shown how easy it is to set up alerts for various types of channels and integrations with some of the different services that you guys may use. Or even if you want to do some fancy automation through webhooks, right? Pulling into the if this then that or Zapier and doing other types of integrations, custom integrations, you can do that. Another feature that we see a lot of integrators using is this network security tab. It's not because we are a SOC, we are not a security operations center tool, but what we are trying to do, because we know that all of these systems that you guys are deploying are network based, we recognize the fact that you often are required to, let's say, manipulate the network or make it so that it's working for those systems. We want to make sure that you get alerted to any time a port from the outside in or from the inside out gets exposed. The reason we want to do this is we don't want you as an integrator or service provider to be the reason that a hole or vulnerability is exposed on your customer's networks. So how does this work? Because Domotz is a cloud-based service, our cloud can look back towards the network. It can look at that WAN IP address that you've been given, and we can see if there are any ports that are open. We alert you to those ports that are discovered. And I have several use cases where service providers have said, you know, I already use a firewall, but I happen to be monitoring my customer's network with this, and we noticed that the security guy opened up a port for his NVR so people can see video, completely exposed the hole. I mean, that's just one example. Domotz recognized the fact that that port was exposed. We alerted the service provider that it was there, and we allowed them to take action on it. Once we do an alert on this, and I apologize that I really don't apologize that I have any open ports on this network, but if I did, what you would see is it would show the port number, and then you would be able to accept it, or you'd be able to reject it. If you reject it and you fix it, fine. If you reject it and you don't fix it, we're going to alert it to you again the next day when we discover it again. So keep that in mind. So this is from the outside coming back into your network. We also have the ability to look at ports being open from the inside, in particular with UPnP. So UPnP, as most of you know, is a fairly legacy technology, but we still see a lot of systems, including Zoom and Teams and Skype, that if a UPnP server is enabled or service is enabled, they will absolutely open up a port to their system just because it's easy to do. We recommend you disable UPnP at this point because all these services typically have alternative ways of using it. But that being said, if we discover that a UPnP port is opened, we will show it. In fact, I have a particular agent here. I always like to show this. You can see there's lots of security issues here. When we look at this, this is just an example of the type of information that we will show, right? Which port is being enabled, how it looks from the inside, et cetera, et cetera. So we alert you to that to where you can accept or then reject that. One other thing that you'll notice that's in beta on my particular account, you won't see this on your account yet, but it's something we're working on. I always like to mention it, is default passwords. The idea behind the default password checking is if we see a device that has a default username and a default password, we want to alert you to it. Why do we do that? Well, if you have an external port that's open to a device that's using a common username and password or a default username and password, that is a massive security vulnerability inside your customer's network. And again, we're not there to solve that problem. We're there to bring awareness to you so that you guys can then go in and change that or make appropriate adjustments to the system. So that's what we're doing with respect to network security. Let's talk about one more major feature that I think a lot of our customers benefit from, and it has to do with logging and reporting. Logging itself is extremely important when it comes to how you manage your customer systems. The idea behind logging is when you see a particular person or one of your team members accessing the network, we want you to be aware of when that was done and what was done while they were on the network. Now, a couple of things I'll point out. Here you can see that I happen to access this switch on port 80 today during this demo. What I'm not telling you is what was changed. Because of the way we encrypt and because of the way we secure packets going between the laptop and that system, we're not telling you fundamentally what is changing in the system. Of course, in this case, if it was communicating to a Cisco switch and they made adjustments to the configuration files, because of our configuration alerts, we'd get those. But if somebody gets into a third-party system, such as a control system, or they're programming a device, maybe they're adjusting lighting in a Lutron-based system, and they're using a third-party tool, we have no idea what they're actually changing. But the fact that we log who made the access and when they made the access is important for auditing purposes for you guys. Another thing that we can do is reporting. Two ways to generate reports. We can either do it automatically, where we send it out to you on the first of each month. And you can select and customize what information comes to you in that report, or you can just run an immediate report right then and there to people of your choice. Again, you can look at activity logs, you can download a list of all the devices that are in the system, you can set up filters, and we're continuing to improve how we optimize and customize these reports for you. To me, this reporting tool, especially if you're a service provider or you have some sort of SLA or service level agreement in place with your customers, this is a great way to stay in touch with your customers and let them know how you're monitoring and managing their system. So I encourage all of you to take advantage of these customized reports that are out there. So with that being said, before I get into some of the more detailed features, Jordan, why don't we throw out that other poll to find out, what people are excited about based on what we've shown here. So, I think I've shown you pretty much all of these features that are here. I'm curious, from your perspective, what is it that excites you most about these particular features? What do you think you'll utilize when it comes to Domotz? So I appreciate any input you have on that. So that being said, and while you guys are filling out that final poll, let me get into a little bit more of where Domotz differentiates. There's a few things that we've done. You can see from our partner integrations, these look like a lot of AV companies. And the fact of the matter is Domotz roots really does come from understanding not only all the devices that are on the network, like the IoT devices, coming back to the acquisition that we made several years ago with respect to Fing. Right? But what we've also done is we focused a lot on AV systems, whether it's unified communications or video conferencing type systems or voice over IP. We've focused there a little bit with respect to drivers, and it's one of the things that differentiates us. Looking at an AV system first, so Wirestorm is a system similar to Liberty. Crestron also has these systems. Think of them as digital signage or digital video distribution systems. One of the cool things that we can do, aside from the fact that you see that all these devices are on a separate VLAN from my standard system, we can interrogate the system and do certain things like look at how they're configured. We can even look at how these devices are communicating over the network. So this is a live snapshot of, what, like this Apple TV here is being encoded by one of the Wirestorm systems and being broadcasted to 2 different displays in this environment. Some systems are not connected. Sometimes I find this Apple TV is connected to like 5 different displays. For retail applications, for sports bars, for gymnasiums, anywhere that you see a lot of sources and a lot of displays, right? A lot of video sources and a lot of video displays. A tool like this becomes a very powerful feature for you as a service provider. Inevitably, right? Somebody on the far end, the manager calls you up and says, hey, this TV is not working. It's not very helpful. Going into a tool like Domotz gives you a very quick snapshot to say, okay, when he said that TV, he actually meant the home theater TV, and that particular TV, it's not communicating with the system. So you can get in, manage it. You can remotely reboot it, whether it was through a PoE port or a PDU. You can even do software reboots, right? We can issue a reboot now. I don't think my wife would appreciate that right now if she's watching TV, but it can be done. Speaking of rebooting, another thing that is somewhat unique to Domotz is the integration that we have with many, many different types of PDUs. I'll look at this SurgeX system here. So we have interfaces and drivers, as we call them, directly to many different types of PDUs. Basic systems that are out there, such as Wattbox, all the way up to more complex and advanced systems, such as Raritan, Middle Atlantic, more commercial grade systems that are out there. SurgeX is another great example, where you can associate devices on your network or even devices that are not on the network. So this particular projector is not a network-based device, but I do have the ability to classify it and state which outlet it's connected to, and then I can power cycle it. Now, You guys as service providers and any of you that are engineers out there, you know that power cycling is not always the best way to resolve problems, but we all know that when a customer calls and is complaining about a system being down, the fastest way to resolve that problem is usually power cycling. And so we give you the ability to do that remotely through Domotz's UI. Let's see, one other thing that I want to mention, and this is one thing that we see a lot of service providers excited about with respect to Domotz. In fact, yeah, let's go back. Let's do it this way. So if we go, oops, I don't want to look at the Draper office. Those cameras aren't nearly as exciting as the IoT lab. So if we look at the network topology, and just so you guys see this, if we do a search for cameras, we can see various cameras that are out there. I always like to look at the Northeast camera because it tells me what the weather's like. One of the things that we can do when we discover on-VIV-based security cameras are on the network, we can take advantage of that on-VIV protocol and grab a snapshot that's directly from that camera. Why is this important? Well, for you as a service provider, if you're helping manage a customer's business, cameras are actually and the security system in general is a very integral part of making sure that their system is safe and secure, not only for their employees and just theft in general, but also for insurance purposes. In regulated markets, so things like the cannabis industry, cameras are a necessary part of regulation, making sure that these cameras are on, they're running 24/7, they're covering every square foot of the facility. So Domotz allows you to see that not only is that network-based device online, but now we can show you that it's functioning properly. We can show you that it is pointed in the right direction, that it's not covered with paint, it's not covered with garbage, spiders, whatever it may be. This is a great way for service providers, and we've seen this more and more, where service providers are expanding their business by adding this type of functionality. I can assure you that for the most part, when somebody has a security system and they say it's being monitored, it's really only the alarm system that's being monitored. Nobody's actually looking at the cameras until they have an incident, and then they go find out that the camera's been offline for 2 or 3 weeks. So this is a great way to help improve the business that you have and make sure that your systems are running. You can get a video stream as well from this. It's not high resolution. This is not meant to show you the details of what's going on that camera, but what it is meant to do is to say, okay, this system is actually alive and streaming, and you can see that that's an active image right there based on the timestamp. So that being said, Jordan, why don't you go ahead and throw up that last poll, and while people are filling out that poll, I want to invite Giancarlo to come in and talk to us a little bit about some of the new features, as well as, Giancarlo, we only have about 7 minutes left. I'd like to address any questions that may have come up that you were tracking or the team was tracking.
And we had so many questions that probably I will select like 2 or 3 at the end. Many questions, but most of them have been addressed and answered through the chat. Anyway, going to the new feature, you spoke a lot about and you show all the features which are currently available. Let's mention, because we received some questions, whatever JB has shown during the demo, this is live in production. So this is a real demo on its own network and its own IoT lab. But what's next? JB has shown how to navigate through a site, or what we call network agent, to reach a specific device, and you can do configuration, you can do monitoring, setting alerts. One of the current limitations of Domotz is that even though there are multiple users using Domotz across hundreds or thousands of different sites, if you have to reach the same type of devices cross sites, so for instance, a Cisco switch SG300 on multiple sites, and you want to change the configuration to all of them, at the moment, you need to go inside every single network and do that manual step of changing, for instance, the community string of the SNMP. What Domotz is working on right now, and it should be available like in 3 weeks now, is a way to search devices across multiple agents. And it works among thousands or even tens of thousands of agents altogether. So you can search Cisco SG300, you will have the entire list of those, and you can change configuration, you can manage, or you can check set alerts or whatever, cross all those agents across the sites, which is, in my opinion, very powerful to scale. Another thing we are working on, and this is with the same purpose, another limitation of Domotz is the configuration of SNMP. So JB has shown you how to set an alert or an eye, monitoring, or a sensor to monitor, for instance, the temperature of a switch. One of the limitations we have now is that you need to know the OID, which is the identifier of the object that you want to monitor for that specific device. We are bringing to Domotz the capability of reading MIB files, and we will have a catalog of MIB files already available, so that when we discover a device on the network, we know which device it's that one, and we know very well how to discover that device. We can show proactively which are the information you can extract directly from SNMP through that device. And this is something that we are aiming to introduce by the end of June, probably July. Another thing we are working on, as JP was mentioning during the call, we have integrated with some ticketing system and PSA tool. He named Zendesk, he named Datto PSA, he named ConnectWise Manage. We are still working that direction. So we are aiming to bring ticketing system like Freshdesk or Freshservice into the place, or PSA tool like Solution 360s and other like that. But feel free to contact us and suggest your own tool that you use. For instance, during the chat, some of the questions were how to integrate with companies like Synchro MSP, and actually we received like 2 or 3 questions about that. Just to let you know, we are discussing with Synchro MSP already, but in general, if you want to see one of your preferred vendor or preferred tool to be integrated in Domotz, the best way is to contact us, JB or myself, or even support, but also the other company, because the more people, the more mutual customer these 2 companies, Domotz and the other, has, the more interest for both the companies to work together in bringing some kind of integration.
That's right, Giancarlo. That's a very good point. I agree with that. I would add to that, Giancarlo. I know that your team is always taking feedback through support@domotz.com, and you guys listen to those suggestions. And once we get to the right number of suggestions, or call it critical mass, you guys implement things really fast, and I'm really impressed with that.
Yeah, thanks a lot, JP. Yeah, but again, most of the inputs come from our user base, and the more feedback we got, the better the tool can be. One thing I want to talk, probably there will be less time for the question and answer. We show integration with ticketing system PSA, which is basically how to send alerts or tickets in those system. We are also working with other companies to bring the data of Domotz into their system. So for instance, think about documentation system, IT documentation system. Companies like IT Glue, companies like BrightCoach, companies like IT Boost, Passportal, PagerDuty, IT Portal, Hoodoo Magic. All of those companies are looking into how to extract data from Domotz because they want to have this valuable data in the report they provide to their customer. In this case, we are very, very happy to work with those companies. And actually, we are talking with all of them. But in this case, the integration is mainly on their side. We can provide the help, we can provide the API, and actually JB showed how to use the Domotz API. We can provide the API and the support to build that very good integration. But it's your job, actually. It's your role to let those companies notify that they need to extract data out of Domotz. And JB, please help me driving that message better than I do. But
yeah,
that's
no, absolutely. So it's important that you guys, if you want to have integration, that you not only ask us, but you also go back to that vendor and say, hey, are you familiar with Domotz? We really, if you're using Domotz and you're using that tool, it's like you want to see better integration. By all means, push that. And Yeah, Giancarlo, do you mind? I know we're running out of time here, but I absolutely failed to mention that everything that I've shown you today on the user interface is 100% based off of APIs. And for you guys that are more technically savvy, or maybe want to create your own dashboard, these APIs are available to you. If you go to portal.domotz.com and under your settings, you will see and you will get access to all of these APIs. So you can build out your own dashboard if you don't like ours, or you can use it to integrate into other tools. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that.
Yeah, thanks, JB. Yeah, that's very, very, very important. So do we have like few minutes for covering a few questions?
Yeah, let's
meanwhile, I see that some other questions are some other questions are arriving, so I will let also the support team to answer those questions in the chat. So we had Jason asking if there is any download of something for Mac OS. I initially thought he was referring to the agent, and so the network scanner, the network agent, is not available for Mac OS. It's only available for Windows, Linux, and a bunch of third-party hardware, Synology QNAP, Readiness, Lux router, other routers from Synology, Raspberry Pi, of course, multiple of the third-party hardware, but not the Mac OS. So on the Mac, the only way to install the Domotz agent, which let me remind that you only need one Domotz agent per site, per network. So the only way on the Mac OS is to create a virtual machine and install the Domotz agent there. However, there is, I probably misunderstood Jason's question because probably he was referring to the desktop app. So GB was showing the tool through the desktop app, and the desktop app is actually available for the Windows, Mac, and also Linux. And you can download that from Domotz portal.
Yes.
Joel asked about what is the integration between Domotz and the tool. JP, do you want to cover that one?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They probably noticed the DTools logo, and a lot of our integrators leverage DTools as a project management tool. So at the beginning, you guys may remember when I talked about how we discover devices, right? We classify all these devices, but you'll note these are, of course, mobile devices, so I don't have a room like a location and zone. But the one thing that Domotz does not do, I haven't found a way to automatically figure out how the device, excuse me, let me scroll down here, where the device is actually sitting. But what's interesting is when you go to a tool like DTools, DTools is a project management based tool and helps you plan out how systems are going to get tied into a particular site. So if you know in a commercial setting that this particular, let's say Nook and Logitech camera and all that is going into a particular room, you will often put that in your inventory list and inside of DTools. Now, if you also associate that MAC address of that device to that room, and then you go through the DTools integration, right? You insert the API key for that particular site, we will automatically port in the room location and zone for that particular device. So again, it's a way to help fill out that information quickly. I showed you how you can export the device list, change it, and then re-import it. You can do that as well, but DTools has a way to automatically generate that. So that's what that integration is.
Okay, thanks a lot, GB. Very last question, and I see that the queue of question is decreasing. I mean, the queue of open question, unfortunately, there are still a lot, but it's decreasing. So we had Patrick, and he was asking if there is any particular integration with voice over IP phones or any particular use case for the space he's in.
I love that question, Giancarlo. Let me go to the Draper office. So voice over IP. So first and foremost, we are just releasing, if we haven't done it yet, a use case with a company that's in Salt Lake City, Utah, called Select Voice and Data. What they do is they're a managed service provider for voice over IP systems. And in this case, actually, let's go back to that Cisco tab. What he does, I'll just classify it as how we look at this on our system here. But what he does is he will install voice over IP hosted voice systems, and then those phones will be on a particular VLAN. He throws in a Domotz agent onto the system, He looks at the primary LAN as well as the voice over IP LAN. And he does this for schools, so for government education systems and medical offices and such. But one of the things that he does is if, let's say, a teacher will take their phone and move to a different office, if they plug it into the wrong system, he immediately gets a notification that the phone went offline. He also can get a notification that the phone got plugged into the wrong LAN. And then what he can do is a couple things. One is he can either give a phone call that says, hey, you need to plug this into the other port, or he can actually log into the managed switch and adjust the VLANs accordingly. So he just changes that port to be on the phone VLAN as opposed to the primary LAN. He does all that so it minimizes truck rolls, and he's proactively solving a problem for that customer. Now, what I did here is I got into the web page of a Cisco phone that we have in our office here, and you essentially can see how I can reprovision this system remotely. So this is a very easy way to use Domotz to securely log into a remote system and reprovision a phone, even if they change their hosted service, or you just needed to make an adjustment. You needed to rename the personal directory or adjust, I guess if I go to the admin side, well, I'm not gonna do that, am I? Because I'm unauthorized. Clearly I need the password, but you can see how you can get in and adjust these things. So great use case, and that use case is out on our website or will be shortly if it's not there yet. Thanks, Giancarlo.
Perfect, perfect. Thanks a lot, GB.
We are, I see we're about out of time here. We are out of time. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Giancarlo, is there any other comments you wanted to provide?
No, just thanks everybody to attending and having the time to attend this webinar. As JP was mentioning multiple times, this is a nice way for us to show new feature, to show the features which are currently in place, but it's also a way for us to get your feedback. No, so don't hesitate to send an email, respond to the poll, sending a chat message, whatever, to let us know what's next, what we need to invest our time into. So we are open to listen to all of you. Absolutely.
Yes, I completely agree, Giancarlo. Thank you again for your time. We know it's valuable. We appreciate it. We hope this was useful. And again, we look forward to your feedback. Thank you guys for attending, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.